Today's daf is daf Samach Gimel, and we'll start from the top of the Amud, and we're trying to prove that Rebbe holds Adam Makne Dover Shelo Bol. And Rebbe darshins a pasuk Lo Taskir Eved El Adonov, which means that the Eved is Meshuchrar, and he no longer serves his master. Rebbe Omer, what's the case? So at the time that he acquired ownership over the Eved, he already gave him a shtar shichr, and he said, immediately when I acquire you, the shichr will be chal. And the Torah is telling him that he can no longer be meshabe the Eved. Hechi domi, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Kigon de Kosav Le, he bought an Eved, and he writes a shtar shichr before he purchased the Eved. And he writes in the shtar shichr, l'shek ekachecha, when I will purchase you, you'll be meshuchra from now. And the Torah commands us, lo taskir Eved al Adonov. So even though at the time that he wrote the shtar, he hasn't yet acquired the Eved yet, and therefore he cannot be meshachra the Eved, so he's being meshachar dover shelo b'olam because he's not an Eved at the time of the shichur. Nevertheless, it seems that according to Rebbe, the Torah is saying that immediately when he purchases the Eved is zocha b'atzmo and he's meshuchar. So we see clearly that Rebbe holds Adam Makne dover shelo b'olam. Now we have another Tana who holds Adam Makne dover shelo b'olam, and that's Reb Meir Desanya. Ha'omer leisha. The Brisa starts with the sheet of the Chachamim that Ein Adam Makne Dover Shelo B'Olam, and completes with the sheet of Rabbi Meir Adam Makne Dover Shelo B'Olam. Ha'omer li'isha, hareat mekudesh li lachash esgai li'achash tizgairi. The Kiddushin bichal after I become a Jew through conversion, or after you become a Jew is through conversion, or an Eved Knani is Makadish and Ishi Yisraelis, and there's no Kiddushin with an Eved Knani. But he says to her, when I'll become a Ben Yisrael, then this Kiddushin should be Chal. Or in the case of Ben Yisrael, who's Makadish Shivcha Knainis, and he says to her, and the Kiddush should be Chal after you receive from your Adon a Shtar Shichar, or a man marries a married woman, and he says that the Kiddushin that I'm giving you now should be Chal liachar sheyomus ba'alech, after your husband dies. Or he marries the sister of his wife, and he says to her, this Kiddush should be Chal liachar shetomos achosech. Another possibility is Mekadesh Yevam l'shuk liachar sheyachlot tzloch Yevamech. And in all these cases, Eina Mekudeshes, because at the time of the Masechet Kiddushin, the Ish and the Isha were not ru'im liskadish zelos. Meir Omer Mekudeshes. So we see clearly that Rabbi Meir holds Adam Makne Dover Shelo B'Olam. The Gemara quotes the end of the Brisa. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler Omer Eina Mekudesh. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Omer Mekudeshes. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler agrees with the Tanakama, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi agrees with Rabbi Meir. Uma Tama Omru Eina Mekudeshes Mishum Eva. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says that the Chachamim will say that the Kiddushin is not Chal because of Eva. For example, if a man marries the sister of his wife, or he marries a married woman, then Midrabanan, according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they invalidated his Kiddushin, because if a married woman will receive Kiddushin, her husband obviously is going to be slightly upset. That's an understatement. And his wife, who's the sister of the man he's marrying now, will be very upset that he went ahead and he married her sister. So the Rabbanan, Mishum Eva, were mafkir the Kiddushin. This comes under the general principle that we've seen over and over again, Afkir Rabbanan l'Kiddushin, the Chacham could be mavatal l'Kiddushin. The Gemara asks, Akasha, v'nachshov nami Rav Yehuda Nasi, when Abaye, on Daf Samach Beis Amid Beis, was enumerating those Tanoim who hold that Adam Makne Davar Shabal Olam. He did not mention Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And the Gemara answers, Hainu Rebbe, Hainu Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is an acronym for Rebbe. And Abai considered on his list, amongst the Tanoim who hold Adam Makne Davar Shabal Olam, he included Rebbe. So he meant Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But V'nachshav Nami Rabbi Akiva, we have a brisa that quotes Rabbi Akiva with regard to Nedarim, and we're going to prove from this brisa that Rabbi Akiva also holds Adam Makne Davar Shalom Bal Yom, and yet Rabbi Akiva, does not appear on the list of Abaye, because Sanya we learned in a brisa. A woman says to her husband, Konam Shani Ose Leficha, I want to make Hegdesh everything that I produce, all my products of manufacture. So let's say, for example, she weaves something that would be Osir like Hegdesh. Ain't Tzarech L'Hafer. This neder, according to the Tanakama, is not Chal. Why? Because of the Shibud. A woman within the framework of marriage, and specifically the Ksuba, is Meshubedes L'Baila. And the Shibud includes Maisi Yadeh. She cannot create an Isur Neder on something that's not hers. The Maisi Yadayim don't belong to her, they belong to her husband. Rabbi Kiva Omer Yafeh. Rabbi Kiva says, nevertheless, we should encourage the Baal to be made for the Neder. And why is that? Shema Tadif Olav Yesef in Aroyla. The Neder could be Chal if she produces more than what she's obligated within the framework of marriage to fork over to her husband. And that's called Hadafa. So from the fact that Rabbi Akiva says that if he's not made for the neder, then the neder will generate an Isser on Hadafa, on Maisi Yadayim Hayiserim, even though at the time of the neder, the Maisi Yadayim don't even exist. So you see clearly that Rabbi Akiva holds that a person can be Magdish, a Davar Shalom Bal Yolam. So why didn't Abai include Rabbi Akiva on the list? And the Gemara answers, this is not a case of a Davar Shalom Bal Yolam. The neder was not chal on the produce that doesn't exist, but rather on hayodayim. Omer of Huna Breder of Yeshua, Omeres, Beomeres, Yikodshu, Yodai, Leosein. She was Magdish, the Yodayim. And that's what we call a Kinyan Peros. So she was Magdish, her Yodayim, Leperosam. And that Yodayim, Isnu B'olam, exists in the world. This leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Samach Gimel. Ha'omer li'isha, just by way of slight introduction, this Mishnah will lead us to the whole sugya of ein l'schiris ela b'sof, or yesh l'schiris mitchila v'ad sof. We'll explain as we go along. Hareat mekudeshes li amanash adaber olayich l'shilton. The condition that was set was that I will speak on your behalf to the powers that to be, and even though you owe them taxes or whatever, I will convince them with my protectia that they should let you off the hook, and with that benefit, you should agree to marry me. Another case, the Esa Imach Kefah, or he makes a Tanai in the Kiddushin. He says, you know what? I'm going to work for you for an entire day. Is Mekudeshes Mekudeshes. If he fulfills the condition and he gets her off the hook by speaking to the powers to be, or in the second case, he works for her in her employment for a day, then the Kiddushin is Chal. If not, Eina Mekudeshes. Now we're going to start the Gemara. The underlying question in this Gemara is how to understand that Mishnah in one of two ways, and we have to figure out which way. One way is to say that the Kiddushin, the Kesef Kiddushin, is the Hana that he's giving her, which means that he's Medaber Olayach L'Shilton, or that he's Esa Imach B'Fah. The other way of saying is that no, he's giving her a Shava Pruta, but on the condition that Adaber Olayach L'Shilton or Esa Imach B'Fah. The Mishnah validating the Kiddushin is only because he actually gave her a pruta, and he said, Harei mekudeshes li bepruta zu, and he made a condition that he would do X or he would do Y. He would either speak on her behalf to the Shulta, or he would serve her in as a servant for a day. And the Gemara says, "U'b'schar lo." We see clearly from Reish Lakish that if he wants to use this actual hana as a as kesef kedushin, that he can't do. He could only use adaber lech b'shilton or esei makapoel as a t'nai, but he must give her a shava pruta. And the Gemara says, why not? For Tanya, we have a brisa, and this brisa is going to contradict Reish Lakish, and is going to prove that you can give a woman this hana as kesef kedushin, because it's shava kesef. A man says to a woman, "Arei makudeshes li b'schar sheher kavtich al hachamor." He's giving her the pleasure of being ridden on. He's riding her on this donkey, or b'schar shel shavticha hashavtich bikaron. I carried you in this chariot, or b'sfina, or in a boat. Eina mekudeshes. Why? Because of the principle of Makadosh b'milva, Eina mekudeshes. Why is this a case of Makadosh b'milva? The Rechiva, or the Hoshava al HaKaron, she already obligated herself to pay him, and he's now allowing her off the hook instead of paying her to receive that ki'ilu payment as kesef kedushin, and that's a milva. Why? Because she owes him a chov. But if he says b'schar she'ar kivech in the future tense alachamor, o shivech b'karona b'sfina in the future tense, then mikudeshes. It means that according to this price, you could be makadosh and isha with schar pa'ula, even though he hasn't yet done it, but he's giving it her now to her as kesef kedushin. So therefore, there's no other pruta, and we don't understand how Reish Lakish could be reconciled with the brisa, because according to Reish Lakish, you always have to have another pruta, which he's giving to her as kesef kedushin. He can't fit in to this brisa, the ukimta, that lechora would be attractive and necessary according to Reish Lakish's view, namely that he actually gave her a pruta for kedushin, and the harkava, etc., was only a t'nai. Why? Because for b'schar kama. If you read the language of the brisa meticulously, it says haret mekudeshes li b'schar, not b'pruta, but b'schar. And furthermore, Tanya, we have a brisa that says that if a woman says to a man, "Shev imi b'tzavta," sit with me and keep me company, v'kadesh lecha, and for that pleasure that you're giving me by keeping me company for a cup of tea, I will be mekudesh to you. Or she says to him, "Schok lefanai," I want you to tell jokes, be my badche, rekod lefanai, do a tap dance for me. Asay kidimus hazeh, build me a little building that looks like this little building. Shaman. In all these cases, we're going to evaluate. If this action that he's doing on her behalf, of sitting with her and drinking tea, or schok, joking, or rekod, or dimus, if any of these are shava pruta, mekudeshes, lamene mekudeshes. Wait a minute. According to Reish Lakish, he has to give her a pruta besides these pleasures that he's doing for her, these acts of entertainment. So what does that have to do with whether the entertainment is worth the shoe of shava pruta or not? It's irrelevant. It's a t'nai. We are evaluating the rekod lefanai, the shevim mitzavta, the schok lefanai, to make sure it has a pruta. That doesn't make any sense. Now, At this point in the sugya, the Gemara is going to tell us that whether or not you can be mekadesh an isha b'schar of a pa'ula depends upon whether yeshna l'schirus mitchila vad sof or ein l'schirus el l'basof. Reish Lakish, Hai Tana Bra, the Tana of these brisos that you're quoting to me, sover ein l'schirus el l'basof. But I hold, v'tana didan, I interpret our Mishnah. We'll see how Reish Lakish saw it in our Mishnah. Sover, according to the opinion that yeshna l'schirus mitchila vad sof. And this is a sugya in Bab Mitzia. And the question is as follows. When a worker, a laborer, is being paid wages and he's doing his work, at what point does the chiyuv to pay the wages emerge? If you hold ein l'schirus ela basof, then the socher, the one who hired the person, does not have any obligation monetarily to pay until the job is done. But if you hold yeshna l'schirus mitchila vad sof, then with every moment of work, a certain percentage of the wages emerges as a chiyuv that has to be paid by he who hired the workers. And this is going to connect to Kiddushin. Why? Because if I hold ein l'schirus ela basof, and the chiyuv to pay the tashlum, the wages for the poel, only emerges at the end of the avoda, so therefore it's not a halva. There's no chov that she owes him while he's doing whatever schar, whatever pu'ula he's doing on her behalf. And therefore it's not mekadesh b'milva. He's giving her kesef, and she doesn't need an extra pruta, she's mekudeshes. However, if you hold yeshna l'schirus mitchila ad sof, and the chiyuv to pay for the wages is generated every moment independently, then immediately when he starts the pu'ula, a chov emerges, and when he's makadisha, he's being makadisha with a milva, and we hold milva lo tzadnit, no? And therefore, hamakadish for milva and a makudeshes. So what in the Mishnah ticked off Rabbi Reish Lakish to come to the conclusion that our Mishnah is holding that yeshna l'schirus mitchila vad sof, and therefore you have to say that he gave her an additional pruta. I shouldn't say an additional pruta. That's the main primary Kiddushin. Rava says that Reish Lakish had a question on the language of the Mishnah. My area de Todi Almanas. Why did the Mishnah have to add the words Almanas? Let's go back to the Mishnah for a moment. The Mishnah says, Almanasha daber olayich. Why add the Almanas? If he was being Makadisha with the Dibur to the Shilton, with that Pu'ula, then why add the word Almanas? El Shmam, Almanas Hecha, call Almanas Hecha the Yoiv Lahu. The words Almanas are only appropriate when he gave her a Pruta, and then he adds an external Tanai with the language of Almanas. And this leads us to the Mishnah at the bottom of Samach Gimel. And this Mishnah is dealing with the question of Almanas Yirtza Abba. And the Mishnah establishes that if a man is Makadesh and Isha on the Tanai, that the father will agree to the Kiddushin. And here the issue is, do we need the father to actually get up and state explicitly, I want this Kiddushin? Rotza Av, Mekudeshes, V'im Lav, Eina Mekudeshes. And the simple reading of the Mishnah would indicate that Rotza Av, there's got to be a positive statement and a consent on the part of the father. Otherwise, in the absence of such a consent, Kiddushin is on. Mesa Av. But if so, then we have a problem. Because if the father died before he got a chance to give his approval, then the Kiddushin shouldn't be chal, and yet the Mishnah says, Harei so mekudeshes. So we're going to have to work this all out, and that's going to be the sugya here on Daf Samach Gimel Amid Beis. Now the Mishnah says, Meis haben, if let's say the Makadesh dies before the father got a chance to reveal his approval of the marriage, Melamded av lomar she'ena rotza. We're going to encourage the father to say that he didn't want this Kiddushin, therefore the Kiddushin would be chal, and she doesn't fall for Yibum. The Gemara says, "My almanasha yirtza ava," and the Gemara says, "How do we interpret the words almanasha yirtza ava? Is it a t'nai that only if the father expresses his ratzon, then and only then is the Kiddushin chal? Ile ma'ati omer ava." In the Kiddushin is suspended in midair until such time as the father gets up and he says, I want this marriage, then ema mitziyasa. Okay, that works out okay with the Reisha of the Mishnah. But what about the middle point of the mitzvah of the Mishnah, which says Mesa Av, Hareza Mekudeshes, which means the father died before he got a chance to express his consent, his approval. Follow are in. And this is going to force the Gemara here on Daf Samach Gimel and Beis to reinterpret the Reisha of our Mishnah so that it can be reconciled with the Sefer.